I will start by saying, we've been on a little bit of a roadshow meeting with some clients, and we were discussing emerging trends. Like, what are the things that we're seeing? What are the things that have been innovated? What are the things that we're seeing both in the PE market as well as things that are just kind of being explored? Most of the large organizations came back and said, this is nice to know, but this isn't real yet. I don't feel great about this. This is probably 5-6 years down the road. Coming here and spending time with all of you, having a chance to speak with many of you, I feel like invigorated. I feel like I'm optimistic. I feel like, wow, these things are actually much closer than I thought they were. I feel that some of the things that we're seeing that I think are real, they are being slowly adopted. I wish they were being adopted faster. COVID definitely helped accelerate some of that. And while there was an initial surge, it definitely slowed back down again. But we're still seeing some of that stick around, and there is some stickiness there. I think it's about identifying, of those things that we feel that could work, being very fit for purpose, and also target your audience. At KPMG, I help lead our healthcare and life sciences deal advisory team. We happen to look at, I'm blessed to look at, roughly 100 to 150 deals sometimes per year. And a lot of those deals, a lot of them is going to be focused in the healthcare IT market. So I get a chance to, every 2 weeks or so, meet with a great, amazing target, lift up under the hood, and find out what makes them great. What makes them special? Why are they happy about what they're doing? What are the roadblocks and pain points that still exist today for them to really reach that next growth spurt? In the course of that time, we get the chance to kind of get our own opinion about what's really working, why is there being a focus in certain markets, and what's going to be coming up ahead. I will say, I'll start off with that generally, when we think about decentralization and patient centricity, those are two hashtag words people throw around all the time, and people who don't understand really what's the true meaning behind them. To me, it's always been about bringing access, closer to the patient. And if we can do that effectively, I think we can solve some of these, issues where there has been clinical trials and recruitment that we only have, like we said before early, 95% of the population do not get access to these trials. Or it's actually bringing some of these access to healthcare to either rural areas or to patients that don't have access to transportation or any other type of issue that's actually out there. I think when you start thinking about patient centricity and decentralization, you always want to take a step back. I think many folks have said this now for a few times here, is that we can't just sit here and think that there is a silver bullet for all of this. We have to really think through what is our strategy to actually attack the specific issue that we're having to achieve. Just this last session here talked about developing your outcomes ahead of time, understanding what you're trying to achieve, so make sure that you're tracking against that. When you're thinking about just kind of attracting against these patients and being more involved, in 2020 when COVID hit, we saw just a spike of activity within the SPAC, IPO, and deal phases of a lot of virtual care assets. A large spike. That cooled off pretty fast. By the beginning of 2022, it was almost at a halt, where I don't see any SPACs or IPOs really at all anymore. In addition to that, while virtual care is an essential part of our system, most investments in the last year are in pretty much general healthcare IT areas. A lot of activity in healthcare RCM, a lot of activity around, I would say, data analytics. How are we kind of taking and linking some of these data assets? They are still very siloed. When we start looking at the last 5 years, we've been pushing for improved interoperability. While that sounded great, and we wanted all of our systems to be integrated, that hasn't really happened at the pace that we wanted it to. So even when we start kind of beginning to look at stuff that's in our claims data, in our pharmacy data, what's out there in terms of real world evidence, being able to link that has been extremely difficult. And a lot of time and effort has been spent, like other folks have said, in the tokenization, in the data mapping, and the data querying. I do think in this last year we've had some really interesting assets that have been focusing in those areas. Developing the type of AI ML technology that allows you to kind of accelerate some of that data mapping and data querying, which in the clinical trial space could take eons and cost a lot of money. Today, I came here to talk about more of kind of, the emerging trends around patient centricity, about being more engaged, but I feel like that's been kind of discussed a lot today. So I'm going to kind of pivot a little bit and maybe talk about just 3 general trends, and then maybe talk a bit more about M&A trends we're seeing. I'll start first. General trends, I'll go through these really quickly. The site of care is shifting. It's been shifting for a while, but it's shifting faster than we anticipated. A lot more folks that used to be treated in the acute care setting is going to outpatient. Folks that used to be in a post-acute setting are being shifted to more of a community or an at-home setting. And even the ones that are at home are trying to even shift more to more of like a remote monitoring type environment. Some of these remote monitoring things are actually real. We deal with a lot of ICU remote monitoring, and it's working to some degree, and there's still some pain points. A lot of devices and activity trackers can still work really effectively. Some of those issues that come back to us is still around data. You're able to pull, let's say, a heart murmur that tracks for people who have issues with their heart. It's like terabytes of information that comes out of that after a month. How do we actually leverage that and really better define our patients? What's most interesting are the folks that are actually looking into some of this data analysis, I think, is that are you taking some of the unstructured EHR data that you have, and are you able to kind of even use AI ML to enrich it? You can link it to molecular genomic data, you can link it to some other real world evidence, and you're coming up with some really unique data sets that you can really better define your patient cohorts. And by doing so, you're providing value back to your providers by saying, look at all these patients that you didn't know actually might have these types of diseases, treatments, ailments that you can now better design your treatment plans around. And then back to big pharma, they wanted to recruit those patients. If I speak with any provider these days, I think the number one issue they say to me is that it's staffing. There's been a sharp decline, I would say decline, level out, even slight decline, in the number of available nurses, physicians, especially in rural areas. And that's not keeping up with demand, which keeps going up and up. I can't tell you the number of medical staffing deals I've done this year. It's more than I can count. And to see the fact that travel nurses, which they deserve to get paid, but seeing them get a 10x growth spike in 1 year was incredible. That is calming down, but it was forcing to seeing hospitals and providers evaluate their own payment structures for their nurses, and also look at, can we make their environment better for them, a better culture? I heard some comments earlier about a provider coming in and seeing 5 different platforms that they have to leverage all at once. That's overwhelming. Again, if we can improve interoperability, it will be more of a one-stop shop, single sign-on, cloud-based tool that you can interact with. Even if you have to go home and start finishing some of your documentation, you do have that access to that cloud-based tool. Obviously, you run into some HIPAA concerns there. If I meet with some life sciences, pharma, CROs, the number one thing I'm hearing from them is probably around patient recruitment. And one of our colleagues today, who's from Parexel, you had some really good comments around they're using some of the, I would say, direct-to-patient, decentralized trial features more than even some of the provider groups are. They had to. The interruption between the patient and provider relationship, that direct site visit, it affected them even more so. They had a number of really important ongoing studies that almost got paused entirely. So they had to really think through hard and fast what's on their roadmap, how do we begin to adopt better technologies to actually incorporate some of these decentralized trial features. And that really just means is maybe we don't have to have every visit every week with a provider. Maybe we can incorporate more of these virtual visits and only do the on-site visits when there actually is truly a test that we can't do direct to patient. And some of those tests can we actually send to the patient. You can send them lab kits, we can do mobile nursing kits. Things of that nature we actually begin to incorporate to do more of a hybrid study. Everyone we spoke, we just did a recent survey. Well, they're not going to plan to go fully decentralized in clinical trials. You better believe that all of them will be incorporating it to a more of a hybrid approach. They have to, both from a cost perspective as well as the fact that they have to have their own staff that they're managing as well. And just as many of the people on the provider side are losing staff, they're worried about their CRAs and other folks. A couple more I just want to quickly go through is there is a shift in who's treating you. It used to be a physician for most things. That's been shifted to either a PA or a nurse practitioner, and some of those activities are being shifted to registered nurses. When I say decentralized, you've seen things happen in other countries where a pandemic happens, all the immediate and nurses and doctors rush to these larger hubs and they treat patients, leaving more of the chronic care patients that need more of that constant care left by themselves. They had to develop almost a contingency plan to have registered nurses be able to provide these types of services to these patients, make sure that they keep getting care. The last one here, I believe, is just how we actually treat care. You've heard from a number of people this. I won't go too far into this, but in addition to leveraging telehealth, provider to provider, provider to patient, leveraging Internet of Things in terms of devices, wearables, you name it. There's also the way we do care is there's a lot more employers taking on plans. They're taking on the risk to kind of absorb some of those costs and reduce costs in their books. A lot more folks are taking on value-based care and exploring those options, taking on risk. Again, all those things that require more data, a lot more data. So if there is a one theme for me that you came across is that every deal I look at now, there's going to be a data element. And most folks, when I look at their SIM, probably says something on AI ML on it somewhere. They're trying to demonstrate that they're on the cutting edge of also leveraging their own tools to demonstrate outcomes, to demonstrate that they're tapping into that untapped resource of data. So with that, I just want to say thank you guys for all you guys coming out today. I look forward to actually having more conversations. I could talk to you guys for probably 5 hours about this topic, but I know you're all hungry. So if you want to talk more about decentralization, about patient centricity and what's happening within the deal market, please pull me aside. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you, Michael.